morning and welcome back to the Done Deal Show. I'm Terry Flewers, joined as ever by Dean Jones. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Good. Are you okay?
Yes. Sort of enjoying the group stages of the Euros coming to an end, and I'm really excited about the knockout stage. I think they're going to be very, very exciting because so many teams are playing well at this tournament. So enjoying the football, good in general. Weather's a bit crap, but aside from that, can't lie. Busy 24 hours or so in the transfer market.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Look, what happens this time of year, especially for the tournament, is that you get a lot of the feelers going out and people working behind the scenes on bids. You won't get many formal bids right now. So stuff that you're reading, like it's, half true, I guess, because, in the case of Harry Kane, particularly, like no formal bid has been given to Man City, but like the outline of a bid is now known to basically all the parties involved. So it's a very weird way that it now starts to open up, but it's really to gauge interest for everybody at this stage. Clubs need to know who they can actually sign. What are they actually going to have to do to get these deals done? And players need to know, like, okay, what's starting to happen here? It's the same with any transaction. When you're trying to buy anything big in life, there's all small chat that goes on before the big stuff happens. And that's where we're at now.
Yeah, completely. Like in my old line of work, it was very much that you could sometimes have 4 or 5 meetings and conversations before you put any formal commercial offer in place because you want to get it right first time. And as you said, that interest is really important. And I know you said this time last week that you would expect there to be a bid of sorts. And I think that semantic element is really important now because it's how people interpret things. I think if you go to an intermediary and say, look, we're going to put £100 million in and offer a player, go and find out what Spurs would think. For me, I just take that as a bid. Whether it's official or not, or it's been submitted by the proper channels, I just take that as being a bid and a bit of interest. And of course, Man City did that reportedly yesterday or at some point in the last few days for Harry Kane, £100 million plus the potential of a player. Raheem Sterling was mentioned. Laporte, and I think Gabriel Jesus as well. What is the latest with Harry Kane as far as you're aware?
I mean, nothing formal's happened, like I say, but I think you look back now to look at what Harry Kane said to Gary Neville, right? When the interview was done, and Harry Kane said, if £100 million offer is made, are they ever going to get that kind of money for me again? That's Harry Kane basically saying, like, I'm £100 million player. If that money's on the table, I think Spurs should take it. So suddenly Man City have got £100 million offer that they're putting in. Like, that's no coincidence. Like, this is worked on behind the scenes, between people working for the clubs, between agents and representatives. The players just kind of informed of what's going on. And of course, £100 million is a reasonable starting point on this. Now, the fact that that's looking like it's 85 million in add-ons, that's not really going to entice Daniel Levy at all. And it is too low. But it's a starting point. And like I said last week, you need to go and test Daniel Levy's resolve at a time like this. Because he's never actually had a big offer on the table for Harry Kane. And as a result of that, Harry Kane can't do much. Obviously, Kane's at the Euros anyway, and he's going to be there a little while longer now that England are through. But it means that people working around the deal can start to get pieces in place for when this all happens after the tournament. So I think it's an interesting movement on the deal. I don't think by any means that this is the limit that Man City are going to. Tottenham will know that. They know that this isn't a reasonable bid. I still think that you've got to be looking at 120 upwards to be getting anywhere on this deal.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the 100 million is very low ball, as you say, and the structure is poor. Really and truly, as you say, majority of it is add-ons, but it's that gauger, and I think it's seeing what the response is like. Is it a categoric no? Is there a bit of a delay? Is there an element of we'd rather just cash and less incentives? Just as you say, to angle where they want to go. I think the player swap part's difficult because without trying to sound disrespectful to Tottenham, I can't imagine a Raheem Sterling or a Laporte wanting to play for Spurs at this moment in time. So I don't feel a swap deal would be plausible. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think a swap deal is plausible at all. End of the day, Tottenham value Harry Kane at £150 million cash upwards. So it's going to take £150 million cash. Also, like the type of players that you're going to be throwing into the deal here, most of them don't fit in with Tottenham's wage structure. Talking about Raheem Sterling going to Tottenham, well, he earns more than Harry Kane. So how does that work? Probably City would argue he's actually worth more than Harry Kane as well, based on what he's done in his career. So it doesn't really work for me like that. And I don't think most of the players that are mentioned have any interest in going to Tottenham. Certainly know that that Raheem Sterling doesn't. It's an interesting one. And look, it all comes back to the fact that Harry Kane didn't need to sign the contract extension he signed when he signed it. At the time, they wanted him more value on his contract, and Tottenham were like, "Okay, we'll give you a bigger contract, but it means you're getting a longer contract as well." And they agreed to that. And this is where you find yourself as a result. So it's a real warning to players, and this happens a lot these days. Whereas players tie themselves into these big money, long contracts, and then a couple of years later, things aren't going how they thought they would, and they want to get out, but they're stuck because nobody can get them out of these contracts in the way that they'd like. So, it works both ways.
Yeah, I think we've seen for instance, with Paul Pogba's doing it right now, and Kylian Mbappe, prime example of they did their original deals and then they've just let them get to this point. So they're in a very strong position where if they don't want to stay at Man United or PSG, and a sale can't be done, they leave in a year's time for free. If 18 months ago Mbappe would have signed a new bumper deal, but it was a 6 or a 7 year extension, he puts himself in a very difficult position that's hard to get away from. So I think players are looking with the amount of money players can make now. I don't necessarily think they need to tie them. So I know 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was important to maybe get a big bumper contract because that secured your life and your family's life and legacy forever. I don't necessarily, especially for these big players, there isn't the necessity to do that anymore. They can make £1 million a month doing Instagram tweets, so they can make their cash up where they need to. And in terms of your gut feeling though about Harry Kane to Man City, do you still think this is a deal that can be done? A lot of the talk from Spurs sort of outlets is not for love nor money are they going to let this happen. But do you think it's more of a case of pay the right amount of money, negotiate a good deal, and Kane will be a City player next season?
I honestly think that Daniel Levy will be very stubborn over this because he has very little to gain by losing Harry Kane. Even if you get £150 million for him, how much of that do you have to reinvest to find someone to make up for what he brought to the squad? How do you go about convincing other players that this is a club to sign for with ambition and aiming for the Champions League? And, Tottenham aren't in a great situation financially right now, but that still doesn't help because the money isn't going to be just sat there in their bank. They've got to go and reinvest it. So honestly, I think that unless it's £150 million, this is going to be very, very difficult. But, give them a decision to make. We'll only know once, as I say, £120 million is a lot of money. There aren't many players in the world that have ever gone for £120 million. So that is a different question for Levy to actually answer. But, I keep checking and everybody is absolutely adamant that Daniel Levy will not entertain the thought of losing Harry Kane for anything less than £150 million.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. I suppose the transfer request would be the next stage, wouldn't it? I mean, do you think that would change too much if Kane officially public? I know he's practically done it in the interviews that he's given. Would a formal transfer request change any of that?
I don't think so, no. I mean, I think he probably will hand in a transfer request this summer. I think that's the way that this is all heading. Once he comes back and he can say to the club, come on, you've got whatever the offer is at the time, 100 million, 120 million, whatever it is, let me go. That's good. That's a good deal for you. I want to leave. Daniel Levy will say, well, I don't want you to. It's as simple as that. That's how Daniel Levy works. And Look, it would literally take Daniel Levy to act differently over a situation like this for the first time in his life. Like, that's the only way we're going to see it. If anyone watched the Spurs Amazon documentary over and saw the Christian Eriksen part of that documentary, the way he dealt with him, he was very nice about it. You know, he wasn't shouting at him. He wasn't getting too angry. He was like, Christian, they need to pay the money. Otherwise, you're not going. I can't do anything about that. That's the way the business works. And that's how he's going to be, like it or not. The only way that, you know, somebody mentioned to me, potentially you can get things changed is, I guess, to get like a super agent involved in this deal. And if there's somebody out there that's working with Man City who has far more experience than the people currently working with Harry Kane on this transfer, and they can say, look, we've spoken with City, we've worked with Daniel Levy before, like, we know how to get this done, give us a part of the deal, let's see what we can do. And then they go into Daniel Levy. Perhaps that could change things. I'm not saying that that's even on the cards right now, but I think in a scenario like that, you can possibly start to work things. As it is right now, I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you on that completely. The whole
But it's also weird because I also think it's mad to think that Harry Kane starts next season at Tottenham at this point, because he doesn't want to be there, and they've got Man City first game of the season. And that is also, by the way, something to take into account here. The fact that Tottenham and Man City are playing on the first game of the season, like, surely that's a setup, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah, I when that came out, I've always said this for many, many years. You see this happen a lot where January transfers happen, and you know, suddenly they draw each other in the FA Cup, and you just think, come on, this is crazy. But
yeah,
does the transfer window close before the season begins, or is it going to protrude maybe 2 or 3 games in? Because that could be a key factor. You know, sometimes teams, maybe Spurs just go, we'll do it, but we're going to wait until after that game because it's too much. That'll be an interesting one to see what actually transpires with that. But there we go. Viewers, do us a favor. Please smash that like button this morning. Any questions you've got for Dean, not for me so much, but for Dean, get your super chats or member chats in and we'll pose them to him. And if Dean knows something about it, he'll say. If he doesn't, then he will be very, very honest and say it's not a deal that I'm involved in or know about. Yeah. So get those super chats in for us, please. But make sure that like button is being smashed this morning.
Yeah. By the way, the transfer window does run into next season. It's a couple of weeks into the season.
So yeah, maybe. Just maybe it goes beyond that, just to avoid that first game of the season. I mean, that would be, with fans back as well, that would be ferocious, wouldn't it? That absolutely ferocious. In other news, keeping it with City slightly, there's been some rumors circulating, names like Riyad Mahrez, names like Raheem Sterling, linked with moves away from City. Arsenal's name has come up. We know they're in the market for more attacking players. What's the latest surrounding those rumours?
Yeah, so Arsenal are making tentative inquiries right now about Riyad Mahrez and Raheem Sterling. Arsenal are trying to figure out what level of player they can sign in this window. They want to be as ambitious as they can. They don't know genuinely who will sign for them at this point. So from what I was told, like they've gone to just sound out agents involved in the deals, representatives of both players, to see, I guess, number one, are they really available like we're reading about? And two, you know, what's the player thinking right now? Just to get an idea of it's even worth trying to sign those players. Personally, I can't see Riyad Mahrez or Raheem Sterling actually joining Arsenal from Man City. But that doesn't matter. Like right now, Arsenal were just trying to do their homework, get stuff done. But Arsenal, they want to make a statement as big as they can, really. And I think that, you know, by knowing that they're looking at players like that, should give the fans some optimism. You'd have seen a lot of players linked in the past week, and there's a lot of people like Aaron Ramsdale, Ben White, Bissouma, loads. And do you know what? There's truth in all of them. Even James Maddison. There's truth in all of that, but they don't know really who's gettable. So that's why you're reading so much. I think, for example, like Ramsdale is very gettable, and that deal is pretty likely. Other deals like Ben White, you're going to face massive competition to sign him, and I wouldn't say it's as likely.
Yeah, I feel that way with the Riyad Mahrez and Sterling situation. That feels sort of like that would be dreamland if we could sign them. But if you don't make the inquiries, if you don't speak to the agents, you're never going to to know if it's plausible and possible. Who else is interested? Because as you said last week, there could be the room to try and move Mahrez away from City, but nobody was really inquiring about Mahrez. So if City want rid of him and Arsenal are the only team that come in for him, I suppose there is potential there at some point to get it done. But if a big Champions League team comes in, that makes it, especially, maybe more on the continent, that makes it very, very difficult. I do know that he owns property in North London, Riyad Mahrez, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to find somewhere to live. I only know that because my old apartment did his mortgage, but there we go. It's I just don't know he did, because he thought he was moving to Arsenal a while back, and he bought property in North London, and then he ended up in Manchester City, which was interesting. But the Arsenal situation is interesting. With James Maddison, you mentioned, I saw some rumors last week that Maddison isn't happy with things at Leicester. There may have been like a falling out. What's going on with the James Maddison situation in general, as far as you're aware?
Yeah, I think falling out probably is a bit stretched from what I've heard, but it's Maddison is a player that's been coveted by a lot of top clubs, and no one's really followed it through yet. I think that he's getting to the point in his career, particularly after missing out on the England squad this summer, where he's going to be thinking, okay, am I just being ignored here because I played for Leicester? Do I need to look for that next step? But also it's about a club paying Leicester what they think he's worth. And you consider a club like Arsenal, is that really the right move for James Maddison right now? Is that a step forward? Not really, in terms of the actual football, in terms of the size of the club, yeah, of course. But in terms of where those two teams right now are and are heading, I think you're probably better off at Leicester. So, yeah, it's a strange one for James Maddison, because I think he'll be looking at Jack Grealish and how everybody's raving about him right now and thinking that could be him. But Jack Grealish isn't at a massive club either. He's at Aston Villa. So it's kind of in his own court right now, James Maddison, about trying to get the right decisions at a time when I guess he's had a bit of a broken season, hasn't he? So he's not really been able to come into the end of it in the kind of form that he would have liked. So I think it's a difficult one.
Yeah, it is. I feel, again, with James Maddison to Arsenal, it feels like a bit like the Sterling or the Mahrez situation. It's someone they would love to get. Whether he's actually attainable this window, a lot remains to be seen on that. For me, and I'm not even, again, I try to be as positive as I can about other clubs. People just accuse you of being salty. Obviously, they're looking at the Lokonga deal, which looks like it's signed, sealed, and pretty much delivered. Basuma and Ruben Neves are deals which I think are really gettable. Then you start moving into that next tier of players in terms of salaries they would want. Champion. I just look at James Maddison and think, if you're going to leave Leicester, surely it's for a Champions League team. I just feel like surely you'd go to a team that's in the Champions League as opposed to where you are right now. It's, I don't know. It doesn't feel.
Yeah.
Sank about it doesn't feel right.
But then are those opportunities going to be there in the Champions League for James Maddison with the type of clubs in England that qualified for it this season? Everyone at Leicester is obviously devastated that they didn't qualify for the Champions League, because really they should have. Like there's not really much doubt about that. Leicester spent more time there than anybody else in those positions. They should be playing Champions League football, and they're not. So it's a tough one. But let's see, because I think there will be more rumour that comes out soon on James Maddison.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the Euros and everything else going on, most deals are dragging. I know he's not there personally, but most of these deals are dragging their heels, because it's a bit of a domino effect, isn't it? It's this case of, we can't go for player X because another one of our targets, player Y, is at the Euros. And let's just wait till that situation's over before we start actually making official bids and trying to move things forward. There's a super chat here that says, hi, Terry. How real are the CDM rumours for Manchester United? And I think it's a nice segue, really, because we spoke yesterday behind the scenes about Declan Rice and his situation currently at West Ham. And potentially he might be looking for a move this summer.
Yes, I spoke to someone actually over the weekend who knows Declan pretty well. And I just said to him, like, where's his head at? Like, surely I've always been of the belief that Declan Rice just won't leave West Ham right now. And he said, actually, you would be surprised. He said, I think he's leaning towards being very open to leaving if the right offer comes along. So that's interesting in itself. I think Declan Rice probably, realises that this is a fantastic opportunity for him in the form that he's been in, breaking into the England starting 11. We often see that players do make moves when they're at this point because they know that in a year's time, anything could happen and that opportunity might pass them by. People who work for Declan Rice have said in the past to the likes of Man United, Man City, Liverpool, that he's willing to leave London. Like if the right offer's there, if you can meet his terms, if you've got the right project, like he's got his eyes open to what can happen in the future. I still think personally that Chelsea is the most likely place that Declan Rice ends up, though. Like because of the amount of salary he wants, because of the signing on terms it's going to take, and of course that massive fee that West Ham are going to want. It's a huge package to sign Declan Rice. West Ham valued him at £70 million last year. That's going up. That is not going down because since then he's had another season in the Premier League, a really good season. And as I say, he's a starting England player now. He's at least £80 million. So it's a really strange one because I think that while a player can want to leave, like Harry Kane wants to leave, it's not always possible. And it might be that Declan Rice becomes more of a story after the Euros and he can actually switch his attention to this. Because for now, I don't think he really is. But let's not forget that, his best mates with Mason Mount. I saw him joking when they got into camp that, he just keeps showing me his Champions League medal and telling me about what it's like to win the Champions League. He was joking, but chat like that does go on. And it will be in his head like, hang on, I'm playing really well. If this lot really want me, it does sound good fun winning the Champions League. As nice as it is to get into the Europa League with West Ham, not quite the same.
No, of course. And I, as you say, it's the price of some of these deals, though, I feel. Sort of £80 million for a central defensive midfielder. To most football fans from the outside looking in, it just sounds extortionate. And I feel like there's a number of deals at the moment. The strikers like the Haalands and Harry Kanes. You've got Declan Rice, feels like he's one of them, where these deals are just almost groundbreaking for their positions. And it's almost this case of it's going to set a precedent for other players in those roles, if that makes sense. And it's whether a club's willing to be the team to push the envelope that far. It's sort of Trevor Francis all over again in terms of the first £1 million player, because Declan Rice, 80 million for the position that he plays in. I understand he's talented and I would love him at Man United because he would certainly improve us. But £80 million just seems a lot for someone in that role. But market forces are market forces, and it's about somebody being prepared to pay it. And if he does start pushing for that move away, as you say, maybe things will change slightly in that space and everything else. In terms of staying with Man United for a moment, lots of reports around centre backs coming into the football club. The Rafael Varane rumour continues to stay. There were reports this morning across a number of papers and publications that United are looking to put in a move or a bid for the Villarreal defender Pau Torres. In terms of centre-back options at Manchester United and those two rumours in particular, what's the latest as far as you understand?
Yeah, the Varane one's a strange one. I mean, obviously some people have better ins on that one. And, it keeps being linked, so I'm definitely not dismissing it. And all I know is that Real Madrid have had no assurances up to now until about him staying. And look, I never believed that Sergio Ramos would actually leave Real Madrid, and he has. So suddenly I'm like, okay, well, if he's gone, then why wouldn't Varane go? So I think it's certainly one to remain open to, but Pau Torres is one that I've written about for ages now. It seemed the case since back in January that Pau Torres and Jules Koundé of Sevilla were the two that United really liked. Towards the end of the season, I was told that they preferred Pau Torres to Jules Koundé. Then Eric Bailly signed his new contract, which changed things a little bit because there's suddenly less pressure on United to sign another centre-back because a lot of people didn't think that would happen. I thought Bailly might leave. As it is, do you know what? Like, I'm told that Bailly might still leave, and that's why this might still be a possibility. And actually, Bailly might end up going back to Villarreal. So that's perhaps something to look for going forward. That Bailly might still leave, and that's why United want another centre back. I think we spoke on here last week as well about the fact that United potentially trialing a back three with wing backs next season. Another reason why you'd need another centre back in the fold, even if you are going to try Aaron Wan-Bissaka on the right side of a 3-man defence. So there are a lot of things to consider there. Pau Torres obviously had a really good season, played against United in that final. So they've seen him up close now. They know exactly what they're getting. Look, he's in the Spain squad. And let's see, it's certainly one that they've had marked up for a while. They've done all their due diligence on him, and they've got the reports in and the scouting done. So it's now a case, I guess, of budget. They still don't know exactly what they've got to spend overall in this market, and that's obviously key.
Of course, and I was talking to a few people yesterday, just in general, and there's I look at the Pogba, David De Gea, Martial. Those three players, I think, are key to that budget in the sense of if they're going and they're leaving and being sold this summer, we know the budget is going to increase. If they're staying, I think it changes things dramatically. And I always have this feeling that the Rafael Varane deal has almost been a bit of a sideswipe for United's plans, because we know that Rafael Varane is more accomplished and he's further down his career than the Pau Torres is and Jules Koundé's. And if he is available for £40 million, it almost is a case of, hang on a minute, we're maybe looking at spending that on these up-and-coming centre-backs. A world-class 4 times Champions League winner could be available for the same. But as you say, does he really want to come to the Prem? Does he really want to play for Manchester United? They have to, a bit like you're talking about with the likes of sort of City looking at, can we get a particular player? Can Man United actually land Varane? And with the Euros going on, it makes it so difficult because all the players we're speaking about are at the tournament, and it's hard to actually nail down who we're going to go after. I think Man United fans, including the Sancho deal, have just got to remain as patient as possible, because none of these deals are going to happen for the next 2. But most of these nations are going to stay in pretty near the end. Not much, I think, is going to change between now and then. United need to know what's happening with Pogba, what Martial is going to be doing. Are they selling one of their goalkeepers for big money? And then I think that feeds into the budget and gives them the opportunity to spend where they need to. And I think the Eric Bailly news is interesting because he signed that new deal, but a lot of us felt that was more just to protect the asset than it was to make him part of the first team.
Yeah, it's been a strange one. I say United, most people thought he was going. It was a surprise even to me, to be honest, when he actually signed that contract, because all the word had been until the week before he signed it that he wasn't gonna be staying. So yeah, it definitely changes things. Obviously, in terms of a defensive midfielder for United, which I can see a lot of people have been chatting about in the comments section. It's, I say, again, going to depend on budget. I mean, one thing I did hear is, and this was a couple of months ago now, so it may have changed, but when United changed their recruitment staff at that level, that they were looking at bringing in a defensive midfielder, but it would probably be someone who was emerging rather than somebody who was already established. One, because obviously that's usually cheaper, and two, because it would give them a chance to kind of fit into the team mold rather than the other way round. I think it's obviously an area that United do need. I think personally, United should be prioritising a defensive midfielder ahead of a centre-back. I think that there have been enough issues there that you could say if you sign someone world-class in this position, it will solve a lot of things. But let's see, obviously they have got new people in working on recruitment now. It will be different to how things have been done in the past as a result of that. And it could be that they surprise us.
Yeah, one thing I'm pleasantly surprised about, very happy about, and I didn't really clock it until a few days ago, with very rarely in any report from any publication hearing the 2 most painful words to Man United fans' ears when it comes to transfers, and that's Ed Woodward. Normally his name's everywhere. It's in every article. Woodward's doing this, Woodward's doing that, Woodward's flying here, he's doing that. There's just not a single mention of him. And the hope is that he's as far away from these conversations as possible, because a lot of things I read about him was that people just didn't like him. And that's always a bad sign if you're trying to negotiate a deal. You've got to build that relationship. So fingers crossed things are being done differently, and some positive results will yield from this later on in the summer. Max here with the super chat says, hi Terry and Dean, what's going on with Chelsea? It's quite an open-ended one there. What's going on with Chelsea?
Yeah, I guess Hakimi is the one right now that's the most focus is on. I know there have been reports about PSG like moves, in the lead to sign him and all the rest of it. I checked with someone just before coming on here who's knows what's going on with this deal. I said there hasn't really been much progress, to be honest with you. He said it's all pretty much as we were, and yeah, PSG are there or thereabouts. Hakimi obviously does want to leave Inter. The thing that is really behind Chelsea here is the fact that Marcos Alonso wants to leave Chelsea, or not wants to leave. That's probably a bit too far, but like he's open to leaving Chelsea, and Inter Milan really do want to sign him. So that's a big thing that Chelsea have got in their locker here. Obviously, PSG would have the cash to go and get this done, and they can get the terms done. But if Chelsea have got a player that Inter think is going to strengthen their team, and it helps make this transaction easier and helps to deal with the loss of Hakimi, then that's a massive plus for Chelsea. The player has always liked the idea of playing for Chelsea. I think having that competition in the team would just make them even better. People say, well, where does this leave Reece James? Well, we've already seen how versatile Reece James is and how strong he is mentally. Probably just make him even better, to be honest, having competition like this from one of the best young wing backs in world football. So, yeah, let's see. Certainly don't give up hope on this just because you're reading that PSG are in the lead.
Yeah, I agree on that completely. I think if they can get Alonso to agree those terms with, Inter, who still a lot of, if they keep the majority of their players, they've still got a great chance of being champions again next year. It's a pretty nice city to live in as well, Milan. It's pretty nice, I've heard. So lots of advantages in relation to that. One of our members, David here, says, any progress on the Haaland deal for anyone? Has anything changed around that over the last couple of weeks?
No, I mean, I still don't expect there'll be any movement on Haaland this summer. I think, as I said before, he's in a great situation, really, because Dortmund qualifying for the Champions League helped him out massively. If that hadn't have happened, he'd have pretty much had to go and find a new club this summer. But as it is, I think he's excited about what they can go and try and do next season with a new coach. And then at the end of that season, he's got a release clause, which pretty much every top club can afford. And he's then got his pick of clubs. Sounds, to me, like he does prefer the idea of moving to Spain if he could go anywhere. But obviously, Chelsea will be in the hunt. Man City will be in the hunt. And those clubs are all having to kind of bear this in mind as well. This is what makes like pursuits of Harry Kane and people even more complicated, because if you could get Haaland, you would obviously get Haaland ahead of anyone. He's going to be the best striker of the next 10 years. But because it's not looking doable right now, they're like, okay, well, what should we do? And in Man City's case, particularly, if they don't get Harry Kane, if they don't get Lukaku, then they'll just look to rebuild a little bit around it, I think. And like you hear, I've heard links of like Oyarzabal and people like that, who they've looked at before. They've got all the scouting. They know he can fit into the model of what they're doing. And you just try and get through another season and then see if you can get Haaland. So, yeah, I don't see massive movement on that one right now. Everybody that the people I speak to covered Dortmund closely say that there's no way the club will consider letting Haaland leave in the same window as Sancho. And with Sancho looking reasonably likely right now, you'll take that to fall through, I guess, for anything to change.
Yeah, and we're not talking Sancho today. I'm making a concerted effort. It's just no point. It just, as you say, the amount of recycled news about him in the last 10 days has been amazing. And both clubs playing PR. We're not paying above 80. We're going to get above 90. You're probably going to both pay somewhere in the middle and then just report it differently. We know what you're going to do. It's like, when you watch a soap and you see like an affair brewing because they glance eyes in the Queen Vic and like 3 months later they're in an affair. That's how this feels. That you know what's coming, but no one can quite see it yet. I think the Haaland one's an interesting deal. As you say, do you think there's any there's a lot of one fan theory going around, and it's one that I know I've said, so I'm not going to pretend like I haven't. if City were to sign Harry Kane and say Jack Grealish, do you think that could trigger Chelsea into putting in a gargantuan offer that maybe Dortmund couldn't turn down?
If they were going to do that, then they'd just go and sign Harry Kane, because they would make that offer for Harry Kane, I think, because I think Chelsea would see Harry Kane as good a fit to them as Haaland. So I don't necessarily think that they'll be triggered by that. No, I think obviously Chelsea have scouted Haaland, known of Haaland for years now, and they would love to have him, but they know it's not likely. They've been told it's not likely, and so I wouldn't really expect that. I'm not saying they wouldn't try their luck. This is Roman Abramovich, and we've seen the kind of business they did last year when everyone took their eyes off of Timo Werner and Kai Havertz. Chelsea suddenly made these slick moves and got in there. So you can't ever rule anything out with Chelsea, but it's not something that I particularly heard.
Fair enough. On Jack Grealish as well, I mean, there's a lot of talk about him at the minute. He's been trending. I mean, also, very briefly, just touching on Jadon Sancho, it was very coincidental that all the news broke at the same time he was trending for not being in the England team. I mean, great time to release a story about somebody when they're already trending, right? Jack Grealish, linked with the move away from Villa. Emi Buendia has been signed. There are these reports from the Football Insider that Aston Villa are looking to put together a second bid, a £30 million bid for Emil Smith-Rowe. Around that kind of saga, is there any kind of truth in this Emil Smith-Rowe situation as far as you're aware? And equally, is this Villa trying to build a squad that can compete for Champions League football? Or do you feel there's an element of them maybe preparing for the imminent exit of Jack Grealish?
I don't think they're preparing for the imminent departure, because they absolutely don't want to lose him. And at this stage, beyond what you've read, absolutely nothing has happened. Like, there's been no offer for Jack Grealish. The player hasn't said he wants to leave. There's been literally nothing for them to suggest that Jack Grealish is leaving, apart from the fact he's really good. He's the flavour of the moment, and there's rumours around him that Man City want him. Emil Smith-Rowe is interesting. I mean, I checked with people at Arsenal, and they were very coy about it. So obviously, it's not a player they want to lose. So I can understand why they wouldn't really play into that storyline. But the fact they haven't got him on a new contract is interesting, and I think that Aston Villa probably just spotted an opportunity to test the water, to give an opportunity to a young player who is full of ambition, has got a taste last season of what it's like, will be aware that Arsenal are about to try and recruit 4 or 5 players, might not get as many games as he wants in the Premier League. And at Aston Villa, there's a possibility there of a team that are on the cusp of challenging for European football, which, to be honest, is about where Arsenal are as well. So it's not necessarily even a step down for him. But I haven't heard anything concrete on it. So, Grealish is going to be an interesting one. Like, there's no doubt that Man City are interested in him. I think that once they clear up their Harry Kane situation, they will move on to this one. I think that with Grealish, it's a weird one, because I was speaking to someone the other day about why he doesn't play for England, and they work in football, and they said what it'll be is Jack Grealish doesn't fit well into a team that is well drilled, because you can't trust him, because he's not going to stick to his position. He's not always going to carry out the exact pass that you want, because the type of player he is, he'll want to do something completely different that nobody's expecting, sometimes not even himself. And that's half the reason why somebody like Gareth Southgate, who's so conservative, isn't starting him. And then you think, okay, so Man City, he goes in there. Is he a good fit for Man City? Like, is he going to carry out everything that Pep wants? I can see him having, actually, if he goes to Man City, a bit of a fractious relationship, because there'll be times when I think Pep would be tearing his hair out watching Grealish, because he'll just go off and do his own thing for 10 minutes. Yeah. But ultimately, he has also got that creative element that very few players have, particularly British players. And that's what City are looking at right now. And I think that, the bond we talked about last week that City are looking at of Sterling, Foden and Kane. And then if you bring Grealish into that mix as well, like, you are literally building an unbelievable core to your team, and they're all mates and they all get on so well. Not much harm to be done.
So it's interesting you say that. My dad used to do a lot more when he was younger, like after dinner speaking with a lot of ex pros. And I was at an event once with him where there was 2 or 3 sort of members of sort of English football royalty, and I was chatting to them, and obviously at the time I was quite young. I was a huge David Beckham fan, and I was speaking about how great he was. And we got talking about the very famous game at Old Trafford against Greece, where he was the nation's hero for that last minute free kick, and everybody spoke about in that game how he was everywhere. He ran around, he pressed, he was just epic. What they said is that behind the scenes, there was anger with David Beckham in that game because of his running around, because of his pressing, and because of him being everywhere. He was actually leaving too much space for the Greeks, and he was out of his position too much. And it actually was what was causing the problems that led to us going behind twice in that game. And it's interesting how sometimes how we perceive something as a fan, that kind of flamboyant freedom that, say, a Beckham wanted in that game, but in this case, Jack Grealish needs to be Jack Grealish, how that doesn't always fit into certain systems. Pep Guardiola, I swear I've seen him say that or heard that he doesn't really like shots from distance because only a small percentage go in. Right? So he looks at it as it's a loss of possession more than it is an opportunity to score. So there could be that element with Jack Grealish, as you say. If you control him too much, do you take away what makes him amazing? So it's a real interesting one.
Then he took Raheem Sterling to a totally different level, didn't he? So that's the other flip of it. And I think Man City's model is you get to the byline, you cut it back, and someone taps it in. And I think Grealish is perfectly capable of fitting into that. But what you're saying about like Beckham and the way that he chased down, it still happens, right? Like Wayne Rooney did it when he was at England because he feels you have to go and do it on your own. You could even argue that Harry Kane's doing it to a certain extent right now because he's not the out-and-out striker that we kind of need him to be. He's still kind of playing the Tottenham role where he thinks he needs to create as well as score, and it's not really the case in this England team. So I think players, when they are like have immense talent, they do sometimes have that feeling that we've probably all felt at some point in our lives, whether it was on the playground or in a Sunday league match or whatever, where you just feel that nobody else is capable of doing it. So you're just going to take it into your own hands. And often it doesn't sit very well with elite football coaches because it's not the way that they see the game.
Yeah. And it seems to be that on the continent, especially, they're more. I feel like there's more of a regimented approach to football in terms of the Italians have always had a way of playing, the Dutch have a way of playing, the Spanish have a way of playing. Where in England it's so hit and miss. Even in our leagues, sort of, you could have 20 teams that play 15 different ways, if that makes sense. And there is a lot more sort of. I wouldn't even say it's always creative. Sometimes it's a bit of hit and hope, but there is a lot more sort of difference in the way we play. And it's you suddenly throw all those players together in an England setup, and it's a case of you've got. The City players are going to play different from the Liverpool players. You play different from the Villa. You definitely play different from the Man United players. So, it's an intriguing one to try and amalgamate that all together in relation to that. Let's have a look at some of these comments that are coming. By the way, viewers, make sure you're smashing that like button, please. Really important to the terrace that you get that done right now. Make sure you're doing it. Most people forget unless we say it out loud. Thank you, Gangrak, for your super chat. You didn't say anything, but thank you very, very much for putting it in. Is Grealish better than Sancho? What's your opinion on that, Dean? Fan talk.
Yeah, very hard to compare. I mean, I think they've got slightly different routes to the top. And I think that Jadon Sancho is probably a little ahead still of Jack Grealish in terms of where he's at technically and in his decision making. And I think the way that he's gone abroad has changed who he is as a person as well as a footballer. So I think he'll be a little bit more cultured and possibly make better decisions at times. But obviously they come into kind of the same price bracket because of that creativity and flair that they've got, and there's not really anybody else close to it. But obviously, look, Jadon didn't work out at Man City under Pep, so whether that was his footballing ability or just his attitude towards the project is a different thing. But I'm going to give Sancho the edge for now, and I hope we do see him at some point in these Euros.
Yeah, same here. We've got a question from another one of our members. It says, Mr. Dean, are Chelsea still linked with Traore?
Adama Traore. Not especially, to be honest. I mean, look, I think if Nuno gets another job in the Premier League, he wants to take Traore with him, from what I heard, as part of his discussions at Crystal Palace. Leeds are really interested in signing Traore and have been touching base on this for a long time. I don't think that Chelsea are hotly pursuing that one right now. And if I was to say anything, I'd say that Leeds are in the lead to sign him, and that if Nuno lands a job at, say, Everton or wherever, then he will want the club to at least try and sign him.
Yeah. Winter Wrath here says, have Tottenham got a manager yet? How is Tottenham's new manager? Listen, I mean, it's the Spurs managerial situation. I mean, I know we've spoke a number of times about it. It just feels like the biggest calamity ever right now. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. Is it 10 people have gone after and not landed any of them? Something along those lines in terms of 10 linked managers. No one signed yet. What's the latest there as far as you're aware?
It's funny because I think last time we spoke, they were on Fonseca, and they've had someone since then. So your Paratici's already looking for his third manager. He hasn't even started the job officially yet. It doesn't start till July. It's ridiculous, really. But look, Tottenham, I guess Daniel Levy's argument would be like, well, we're doing the right thing because none of these person was the right person. That's what his argument will be. Like, well, we haven't appointed one because we haven't found the right man. Don't criticize us for not giving these people the jobs because you didn't actually want any of these people either. Like Gattuso, I think largely there was a big social media movement to stop that from happening. And in the end, Tottenham couldn't ignore it, and they had to call off the talks and tell Gattuso that. I think there's not a promise to any of these managers either about how much money they'll have to spend. They are all being told that Harry Kane will stay, but they aren't being told about what the funds will be to invest in the squad. So I think it's a really tricky one. And I think that, Graham Potter's back being spoken about now. It wouldn't surprise me if other people... I think Steven Gerrard will possibly even become one soon that they have to consider because it's just the point they're getting to. There are, Gareth Southgate's been mentioned, Roberto Martinez has been mentioned. At this point, you can barely discount anyone. And if they're going to go after an Italian, which they seem to be desperate for, then they should be going after Mancini after the job he's doing.
Yeah, brilliant with the way the Italians. That's who I want to be the next England manager. To be fair, I know that they've always said we need a world class manager. And then I know they said, I'll get another foreign guy, but I don't care. For me, it's world class is world class. I think world class foreign manager that's managed in England.
Yeah,
it could work. It could work. Yeah, the Spurs situation, though, as you say, it's an interesting one. There's a comment from CJ says, any truth in Real Madrid agreeing a deal with Haaland? No,
not as far as I know. Not as far as I've heard. I do think it's where he wants to go. That's what I can say. I think it's always been his path, and I know that Barcelona were obviously keen to have discussions as well. As soon as his agent was out meeting clubs, they were the first two clubs he went and met, and that's why I'm pretty adamant that he'd love to go to La Liga, and I think it's a good stepping stone from where he is right now. With the Premier League, there are also a lot of unknowns that come into how you fit in and how well it goes for you. Whereas I think, for Haaland going into Madrid, it's a good fit. But I haven't heard that now.
Yeah, it's they're one of them. You hear every other day he's linked to someone else, pre-contract somewhere else and stuff like that. There was a rumor this morning, actually. I feel a few comments on this as well around a Pogba Varane swap deal. I mean, you always see these swap deals being mentioned. How likely is something like that in your experience for a swap deal of two players of that magnitude?
I mean, they've been rare up to now, but because of COVID and the regulations around FFP and swap deals, you're now in a position where you can kind of put a value on players and swap and kind of protect your bank balance, if you like. So that's one reason that swap deals are going to be more talked about and possibly more doable than before. I don't think that's the worst shout I've ever heard. I think that it could benefit both for sure. There's still always talk though about Pogba signing a new contract, and I'm still not convinced that won't be the case.
Yeah, that was what was circulating yesterday. Sort of rumors of sort of £450,000 a week deal for Paul Pogba, and as you say, it's money talks in football. It'll be his last major deal. You know, he might. It's interesting that the news he got yesterday. So a lot of Pogba's, when the rumors were he's going to leave, a lot of Pogba's fans, Pogba FC, are sort of like, "Oh, I'm glad he's leaving. He'll go and achieve great things." And then the rumors are he might be signing, and they're like, "I'm going to turn my back on Paul Pogba. He's got no ambition because he wants to play for Ollie." Rather than thinking, well, actually, my favorite player that I rate and respect trusts Ollie. Maybe I should give him another chance. That's never their train of thought. It's I'm going to turn on Paul Pogba. But that one, I think with the Paul Pogba deal, just through things I've read and sort of people I've spoken to, there's going to be hundreds of rumors, but I would ignore nearly all of them until after the Euros, when Man United sit down with him and his team and they discuss what they're going to do, because I don't think Paul Pogba's made his mind up yet. So swap deals for Varane are impossible when Pogba doesn't know what his decision is yet, if that makes sense. And I think a lot of it, as you say, the transfer news at the minute all feels very much like everything's treading water and is on ice because of the Euros anyway. So I wouldn't get too now down on anything. The Hakimi deal is a little different because the player isn't at the Euros, but we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. We have another super chat here. Says, my question to Mr. Dean. I'm an Arsenal fan. Do you think Arsenal will bring in 3 world-class players this summer?
Depends what your class is world class. They're going to try. They're going to try, and they've got a good budget. They're obviously going to be moving players out as well to help get to the budget that they need. But the Cronkies are going to put in extra money because they want to, placate fans a little bit. And so they want to be as ambitious as they can, like I said before. And world class, I'd say, is probably a bit of a stretch. I don't think you're going to be in the market for any of the biggest names in football right now, because the status of the club isn't at a point when most people are going to be interested in that. But I think the next tier down is where you start shopping. We mentioned at the top, like putting in inquiries for Sterling and Mahrez. I think if that's your starting point, there's not a bad place to be, because then you start, going down the list from there, and hopefully you end up in a decent place. So I think Arsenal will make at least 4 signings this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Final question, just very quickly from Shane. It says, will United get a CDM? We already covered that a little bit earlier, Shane. Thank you very much for the super chat. Dean has said that potentially, but it may be someone for the future as opposed to like a ready-made star right now, if I remember that correctly. So we will see in that space there. Everybody that has tuned in, a massive thank you to each and every single one of you. Please make sure you share this on your social media platforms. Hit that like button. Make sure you also subscribe and turn on the bell notification as well. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Goodbye. God bless. And we'll see you all again very, very soon.